The river was swallowing voices that year. Not fish, not boats. Voices, the soft sounds children made near the water at sunset. By the time darkness fell, those sounds were simply gone. By morning, nobody could explain where they went. So the village of Agita made one rule. Nobody approaches the river after sunset. Nobody stands at the forbidden bank. Nobody calls toward the water. The elders said it plainly. This season belongs to something older than all of us. Stand back. Most people obeyed. Fear is a very good teacher. But Azu had to return a borrowed fishing net. He was simply a poor man with a small debt to settle before sleeping. Nobody lends things twice to a man who does not return them. He was a canoe repairer. Quiet, gentle, unmarried past the age when the village expected men to have sons. People pitied him on good days. On bad days, they mocked him. His workshop near the market edge was old and small, the kind of place people walk past without looking. That evening, carrying the fishing net over one shoulder, Azu walked the river path alone. The sky was already orange when he heard crying near the forbidden bank. His feet stopped without asking his mind. He should have kept walking. Any sensible man would have. But that crying was not the kind of sound you walk away from. It was soft and broken, like someone who had already wept so long they barely had strength left. Azu pushed through the tall grass near the bank and stopped. A young woman sat on a flat stone at the river's edge. She wore wet bridal cloth that clung to her like it had never known dryness. Her feet were bare. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her face was tear-streaked but calm, the way a person looks when they have accepted something terrible. She was beautiful. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way that made Azu forget himself completely. He looked at the mud behind her, searching for footprints. There were none. No path worn into the grass. No boat. Nothing to explain how a woman in wedding clothes had arrived at this stone without walking. She looked up and saw him. She did not scream. She did not run. She reached out and gripped his wrist with both hands, as if he might disappear. If anyone asks, she whispered, do not tell them where you found me. Before Azu could speak, the water beside her rose slowly, though no wind blew. Azu did not sleep that night. The woman, she would not give her name, not yet, sat quietly near the doorway of his hut while he built a fire. She accepted his shelter, without argument. But as the sun began its final descent, everything about her changed. The calm left her. She stood suddenly and checked both windows. She pressed her palm flat against the door and closed her eyes, listening for something outside. Then she turned to Azu with a fear he had never seen on a human face before. Close everything, she said. Every door. Every window. Before sunset finishes. Why? Azu asked. Just do it. Her voice was steady but urgent, the way a mother speaks when danger is very close and there is no time for questions. Azu obeyed. He did not fully know why. Later he would say it was her eyes. When a person is that afraid, their fear becomes yours without permission. He sealed the door. He pushed cloth against the wall cracks. He sat across from her in the smoky firelight and waited. Around midnight, something knocked on the outer wall. 3 slow, even knocks. The woman looked at Azu, without moving. Do not open it, she said quietly. Whatever you hear tonight, do not open it. Morning came the way it always does, slowly, gently, as if it had no idea what the night had carried. Azu opened the door and breathed in cool air. The compound was empty. The path outside was quiet. Whatever had knocked in the darkness had left nothing behind. No marks. No tracks. Nothing at all. The woman slept lightly near the back wall, her wet cloth now dry. In the daylight, she looked less frightened and more simply tired, like someone who had been running for a very long time. Azu left her resting and went to his workshop. A wealthy fisherman named Chidu was already waiting there, which had never happened before. That old canoe, Chidu said, pointing at a boat Azu had tried to sell for months. I will take it. Azu named a modest price. Chidu paid triple without argument and walked away. Azu stood holding 3 times his asking price in his palm, confused and still. When he returned home that afternoon, the woman was awake. She had swept his compound and arranged his tools neatly along the wall. "You are still here," Azu said. "Yes," she replied calmly. He sat down. "Tell me your name at least." She studied him for a moment. "Maji," she said. Outside, people were already beginning to ask questions. By midday, the village was talking. That alone was no surprise. Agita always talked. But this time nobody, not a single elder, not a woman with a good memory, recognized the girl in Azu's compound.
Maji.
The name meant nothing to anyone. No clan mark. No accent from any known village. No family name offered. She answered questions politely and gave nothing away. That combination, beauty, silence, mystery, made people uneasy in a way they could not name. Two elderly women came to Azu privately before sunset. Mama Ojiko, who had outlived 4 husbands and forgotten nothing, folded her hands across her lap. Some women come from places with no name on any path. They arrived during river season carrying things that look like blessings. "She has already brought me good luck," Azu said. The old woman shook her head. "Luck and debt look exactly the same in the beginning." The second elder, a thin woman named Agwo, leaned forward. "A woman who arrives without footprints does not walk the same earth as the rest of us." Azu thanked them politely. He did not believe them. But that night, when Maji agreed quietly to be his wife, he stopped thinking about warnings entirely. Some doors, once they open, do not invite you to look back. The wedding was small. That was not the plan, but it became the reality. Azu had imagined drums, palm wine, women singing in 2 rows, food passed between families. But when word spread that no family had come to speak for Maji, drummers grew hesitant. 2 refused entirely. Those who agreed beat without spirit, the way men do when they sense something is wrong but cannot say what. Half the village stayed home. Those who attended sat watching Maji more than celebrating. She wore fresh cloth and carried herself with grace. She answered elders correctly. She accepted the palm wine cup properly. By every measure, she performed the ritual well. But when the drums shifted to the old river spirit wedding song, the one every bride was supposed to smile through, Maji's face went completely still. Not anger, not sadness. Something quieter. Something like recognition. Nobody else noticed. Azu noticed. He said nothing. That night after the guests left, he found her wedding beads on the sleeping mat. He reached to hang them on the wall peg. They were wet. He looked at Maji. She was already asleep. He hung them quietly and told himself it meant nothing. He was a practical man. Practical men find explanations. He went to sleep believing he would find one soon. Within 3 months, Azu's life became unrecognizable. The workshop that had barely kept him fed suddenly had more orders than he could fill. Men who once borrowed canoes now commissioned new ones. A trader from the next village sought Azu specifically after his own boat cracked badly. Payment arrived without argument. Debtors who had owed Azu money for years appeared at his door, as if they had finally remembered. Even elders who used to walk past without greeting now stopped to ask his opinion on small matters, the kind they never asked poor men about. Azu worked hard. He had always worked hard, but hard work had never produced this kind of result before Maji arrived. People began connecting those 2 facts openly. His friend Obike said it first. They stood at the workshop one afternoon while Maji cooked nearby. Obike lowered his voice. "That woman changed your life too fast." He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. A wife who changes everything this quickly must have questions she has not answered. Azu laughed it off, but the sentence stayed inside him. That evening he asked Maji where her family lived. She looked at him calmly. "The day you force that answer, peace will leave this house." He laughed to ease the moment. Her face did not change. She did not say it with anger. That was what made it stay inside Azu's chest so long. No raised voice. No tears. Just a clear, even statement, the way a farmer tells you rain is coming by reading the sky. Azu told himself it was just her way of speaking. He was a patient man. But the next week his mother arrived. She came without announcement, carrying her sleeping mat and cooking pot, which meant she was staying. She greeted Maji with a smile that did not quite reach both sides of her face. She accepted food gratefully. She complimented the compound's cleanliness. And then she began watching. Every day, she found new things to observe. She watched how Maji moved each morning. She watched what she ate and what she avoided. She asked questions that sounded like conversation but were careful inventory. She never eats smoked fish, his mother told him one evening when Maji had gone to fetch water. 8 days. Not once. Some people simply dislike smoked fish, Azu said. His mother looked at him the way older women look at men choosing comfort over truth. A wife who hides what she will not eat, she said slowly, is hiding other things too. That night Azu lay awake for a long time, listening to Maji breathe quietly beside him. The market women were always fastest with new information. What elders took weeks to settle, they resolved in one afternoon. By the 3rd month of the marriage, the verdict was ready. Maji had no child growing, no signs, no morning sickness, no changing body. And in Agita, 3 months without signs of a child was already a full conversation. Perhaps she is barren, said one woman near the yam stall. Perhaps she is using something against it, said another. Perhaps the husband does not know what he married, said a third. The words spread the way Harmattan fire spreads, quickly, without permission, consuming everything in their path. That evening Azu made his first real mistake. He came home and told Maji what people were saying. He told himself he was being honest. A husband should share these things with his wife. But what he was actually doing was carrying the village inside his marriage and giving it a permanent seat. Maji sat quietly while he spoke. When he finished, she looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked up. Do you believe what they say? Azu said nothing. She nodded slowly. Then the village has already sat down between us. That night the space between them on the sleeping mat felt wider than it had ever been before. The fertility ritual came on a Wednesday, during the week of the new moon. All married women were expected to attend, an old prayer held at the riverbank, women kneeling, elder women chanting, water blessed with palm fronds. It was about asking the earth for children. Maji refused. Not quietly in private, the way a woman might whisper her reasons and let her husband speak on her behalf. She refused at the hut doorway, in front of Azu's mother and 2 neighbor women who had come to walk her there. I will not go, she said. One of the neighbors frowned. It is tradition. I know, Maji said. She did not move. You are insulting the women who organized this. I am not insulting anyone. Then come. No. The women left without her. Azu stepped out from behind the curtain where he had been listening to everything. He looked at Maji. Something inside him had shifted, not because he was cruel, but because public embarrassment is a powerful poison. His friends were asking questions. His mother was watching. The village was forming opinions about his household. He spoke sharply for the first time. You are making me look like a man who cannot guide his own home. The sky outside cracked with thunder. Not rain. Just thunder in a perfectly clear sky. After that morning, things moved the way water does when a crack first appears in a clay pot. Not a flood. Just a slow, quiet, growing leak. Azu began watching the sunset more carefully. He had always known Maji disappeared before dark. She had never hidden it, but before the argument, he had simply accepted her way. Now he watched. He timed it. He started asking himself questions he had set aside for months. Where did she go each evening? She always returned by deep night, when he was already sleeping. Or so he had assumed. One evening he stayed awake deliberately and watched her come through the door before midnight, feet wet, wrapper damp at the hem. Where were you? He asked. She looked at him carefully. Nowhere that harms you. That is not an answer. It is the only safe one I have. His friends were not helping. Obike said it plainly over palm wine one afternoon. A man who fears questioning his own wife is already living in her shadow. She should have no secrets from you. Azu nodded and said nothing. But that word, shadow, settled inside him like a stone dropped into still water. He was a gentleman. But gentlemen can be pushed into hard corners by enough voices repeating the same thing. The evening Azu locked the door was not planned. He did not wake up deciding to do it. But when Maji rose from the mat as sunset approached, the same movement she made every single day, reaching for her wrapper, preparing to leave, something snapped inside him. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Outside," she said. The same answer she always gave. "Not tonight." He stood and moved to the door. Maji stopped completely. She looked at him with an expression he had never seen on her face. Not anger, something closer to terror, and beneath the terror, grief. "Azu," she said quietly, "please do not do this. I am the husband in this house." He turned the key. "You will stay and explain what you are hiding from me." Maji stood very still in the center of the room. Her breathing changed, faster, shallow, like someone who had just run a very great distance. She pressed her palms flat against the wall. She closed her eyes. Azu watched and felt his certainty crack. "Maji." "Stop," she whispered. Then they both saw it at the same moment. Water was seeping slowly under the sealed door. A thin dark line of it, spreading steadily across the dry floor. No rain was falling. The path outside had been completely dry all day. By morning a child was missing. A 7-year-old boy named Kalechi, son of a fisherman 2 compounds away. He had gone to play near the market the previous evening and never came home. His mother searched through the whole night. His father took a lamp to every corner of the village. Nothing. By the time the sun warmed the compound walls, a small crowd had already formed near Azu's hut. Not shouting. Not yet accusing. Just standing in the way that people stand when they're deciding whether to say out loud what everyone is already thinking. Someone pointed at the ground near Azu's door. Wet footprints. Child-sized. Leading toward the river path. The crowd went very quiet. Azu stepped outside and looked at the footprints. He looked at the watching faces. Inside, Maji had not moved from the back wall since the night before. She sat in silence, pale, her hands folded in her lap, like a woman waiting for judgment she had already accepted in her heart. 2 elders pushed through the crowd and faced Azu. Their faces were not cruel, but they were serious in the way that means consequences are approaching. "Where?" the first elder asked slowly. "Did you first find that woman?" The crowd waited. Even the wind seemed to pause. Azu had kept the promise for months. Through the gossip, through his mother's suspicion, through the market women's accusations, and his friends' steady questions. He had held Maji's secret the way she had asked, in silence, without cracks. But standing before 2 elders with a missing child and a crowd watching his face, the secret became too heavy. He told them. He said he found her near the forbidden bank. He described the wet bridal cloth. He described the missing footprints. He said it all quickly, the way a person speaks when they are relieved to finally put something down. The elders looked at each other. Behind him, Azu heard the hut door open. Maji walked out slowly into the morning light. She did not look at the crowd. She looked only at Azu. Her face was very calm, not with peace, but with the emptiness that follows something broken beyond repair. "Then you have opened what should have slept," she said. Azu opened his mouth to explain. The child was missing. The elders had demanded answers. He had no choice. But she had already turned away. No argument. No tears. Just 7 quiet words, and then a silence that landed like a door closing forever. She left before dawn. Azu did not hear her go. He had finally fallen into heavy sleep after midnight, and when he opened his eyes the mat beside him was cold and empty. He ran to the door. Unlatched. The compound was still. He walked to the gate and looked down the path. Empty. He checked the market path. Empty. He went to the edge of the village where the road bends toward the river, and there he stopped. He could see her from a distance. Maji stood at the water's edge in the early gray light, her feet at the place where the bank meets the river. Her wrapper was still. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, the same way he had first found her. He wanted to call out. He wanted to run to her. But something in the stillness of that moment, the strange way the water moved around her feet without pulling her under, told him this was not something he was supposed to interrupt. The river rose around her ankles, then her knees. She did not fight it. She did not look back. She walked forward slowly until the water covered her completely, and then there was only dark water, flowing the same direction it always had, as if she had never existed at all. The days after Maji left moved like heavy clay. Azu's biggest canoe, 3 months of careful work built for a chief from the next village, cracked the morning it was to be delivered. A straight, clean crack down the center hull. The chief refused to pay. Within a week, 2 other customers canceled orders. Azu told himself it was coincidence. Wood cracks. Customers change their minds. A man's luck rises and falls like river water in dry season. But some part of him already knew. Some part had known from the very first morning when triple payment appeared in his palm without reason. The luck had never been random. And when the source of a thing disappears, the thing itself does not survive for long. He repaired canoes more slowly now, with less certainty in his hands. The confidence that had lived in his fingers during Maji's time, the feeling of building something that would last, had gone out of him quietly, the way warmth leaves a fire that nobody feeds. His tools still sat in the neat arrangement Maji had organized on the first day she arrived. He did not move them. Some evenings he sat in the workshop staring at them, and could not bring himself to work at all. The friends went next. Not all at once. One by one, the way they had come. Obike stopped appearing at the workshop in the mornings. When Azu saw him at market, the greeting was too short, the kind that means a friendship has cooled without announcement. 2 others who had shared palm wine during Maji's time found new reasons to be elsewhere. The most painful was Azu's mother. She did not leave. She was his mother, and that was different, but she stopped defending him in conversations she brought home from the marketplace. She stopped saying, "This is not his fault." She began saying quietly in the evenings, "Perhaps you pushed her away." That perhaps from his own mother hurt worse than any accusation from outside. The village had rearranged itself. The same people who had envied Azu now avoided him the way people avoid someone they are sorry for, but cannot help. He walked through the market and felt it, the careful spaces made around him. Not cruel, just careful. The kind that says, "We are sorry for you, but we would prefer not to share your trouble." Azu returned home one evening and sat in the empty compound until his fire burned down to nothing. Nobody knocked. Nobody came. 3 months after Maji disappeared, travelers began arriving with stories. A man from a village 2 days' walk east stopped at the market for water and said something strange. He described a woman who appeared in his community during a terrible dry season. She walked to their oldest well, placed both hands on the stone rim, stood still for a long moment, then walked away before anyone could question her. By the following morning, the well had filled with clean water for the first time in 2 years. People asked him to describe the woman. He described Maji. Azu was at the market when he heard this. He stood very still. A second traveler arrived a week later with almost the same story from a different direction. A woman appearing near failing rivers, walking close, saying nothing, then leaving quietly. Water returning by morning. She never stayed after sunset, the traveler added. Nobody ever saw where she went when darkness came. Azu listened to both accounts with something complicated growing in his chest. Not pride. Not quite sadness either. The specific pain of a man who held something precious and spent his time questioning its weight instead of understanding its nature. He went home and sat alone until morning came. The flood warning came on a market day. It began as a rumor in the morning and became visible reality by afternoon. The river had risen through the night without any rain. By the time people gathered at the bank, it was clear this was not seasonal flooding. The water was moving against its own current. Farms near the river edge were already ankle-deep. The chief summoned the elders. They gathered and spoke for a long time. Then they sent for the oldest among them, a man named Augury, so old he rarely left his hut, who came slowly on a carved stick, his eyes cloudy, but carrying something that outlived ordinary memory. He listened to everything reported. The rising water without rain. The missing child months ago, since found wandering in the next village confused but unharmed. The strange woman who appeared and disappeared. The man who found her near the forbidden bank. Augury closed his eyes when the account finished. "There is a covenant," he said slowly, choosing words that carried great weight. Older than anyone living. Older than the market. Older than the river path itself. Everyone leaned forward. Every generation. The old man continued. The river chooses a protector. Not by force. By offering. Through the bloodline that once showed it mercy. The gathering went very quiet after Augury finished speaking. Azu sat at the back, with his hands folded in his lap. Years ago, the elder continued, someone made a promise at this river, a covenant. As long as a protector stands between Agita and the water, the old debt will never collect. But when that protector is driven away, Augury looked toward the flooded farms. The debt returns for everyone. Azu's chest tightened. What debt? Augury turned toward him. Your village took something from this river long ago that should not have been taken. The river has been patient. But patience has a limit. One younger elder frowned. Then Maji came to protect us. Not to harm us? She came to fulfill the covenant. Augury said quietly. She chose a husband from the bloodline that once showed the river kindness. His eyes settled on Azu. Your father's bloodline. My father has been dead for 11 years, Azu said. Yes. But before he died, he did something at this river he likely never told you about. The old man fell silent. That night, Azu opened the small chest where he kept his father's things for the first time in years. His hands moved through old cloth, dried palm fronds, ordinary objects. Then his fingers found something that was not ordinary at all. His father had been a quiet man, the same way Azu was quiet. He worked the river his whole life, repairing nets and helping fishermen whose boats were too broken to bring to shore. He never spoke about himself often. At the bottom of the chest, beneath folded cloth and old gourds, Azu found a single bead. It was not like any market bead. It was smooth and dark, almost black, but when firelight touched it, something moved inside it. The way water moves beneath ice. It was the kind of object you look at and feel the looking is not quite right, as if it was aware of being seen. Azu held it in his palm for a long time. He thought of Maji's wedding beads, wet without reason on their wedding night. He thought of the 3 beads she wore on her left wrist that she never removed for any reason. He remembered the exact color. It was the same. He went to Augury in the morning with the bead open in his palm. The old man looked at it once and closed his eyes. Your father rescued a drowning girl from this river, he said quietly. Before dawn, alone. She vanished before he could bring help. He kept the 1 bead she left on the bank. Azu could not find any words at all. The flooding reached the first row of farms 2 days later. It came quietly, not with drama, just water appearing where it should not be, spreading between yam mounds, swallowing cassava sections, covering paths that people had walked their entire lives. The chief called Azu forward at the evening gathering. You married her, he said. Not unkindly. Simply as a fact. Yes. You broke the promise she asked of you. Azu did not argue. Yes. And you locked her inside when she needed to be free. Silence. The chief looked toward the river. Augury says there's still 1 chance. The covenant is broken, but not yet fully collected. A small window remains. If the person responsible goes to the river alone and speaks directly to what waits there, it may still listen. The elders looked at Azu. Azu looked at the water, surrounding the farms his neighbors had tended for their entire lives. He looked at the faces of people who had mocked him for years, briefly envied him, and then carefully avoided him in his disgrace. He pressed his father's bead against his palm. He did not hesitate long. I will go, he said quietly. Nobody argued. Nobody offered to come with him. He walked toward the river path alone as the fire behind him burned low. He reached the forbidden bank at midnight, not because he was brave. He had spent enough months alone to understand he was not a particularly brave man. He went because there was nothing left to do. Bravery and necessity often look the same from a distance. The flooding had changed everything. His feet found soft ground where there had once been firm soil. He kept his father's bead pressed in his closed fist the entire way. He reached the bank and stopped. The river was higher than anything he had ever seen. Dark, wide, moving with a weight that had nothing to do with ordinary current. In the moonlight, it looked less like water and more like something thinking slowly, with all the time in the world. He opened his mouth to speak. A voice came from beside him before any word formed. You did not have to come alone. Azu turned. Maji stood a few feet away at the very edge of the bank, her feet on the last dry ground before the water. She wore the same wet bridal cloth from the night he first found her. Her expression was not warm, but it was not cold either. It was the face of someone who had been waiting a long time to say something important, and was finally deciding if the moment was right. Why did you come back? Azu asked. Maji looked at the flooded farmland behind him. Because the debt still has one chance to stop. She paused. Not because you deserve it. The words hit him. He did not argue. He had earned them. I understand now, he said. About my father. About the covenant. About why you chose me. He opened his palm and showed her the dark bead. I found this in his chest. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked directly at him. I did not choose you only because of your father's kindness, she said. I chose you because I believed you were like him. A man who does not grab what does not belong to him. A man who protects instead of controls. Her voice stayed even. I was right, and then the village made you forget who you were. Azu lowered his head. I am asking your forgiveness. I know. Can it change anything? She was quiet. The river seemed to pause, not recede, but pause, as if something beneath it had turned to listen. I broke ancient law to become your wife, she said finally. I chose a human life over what I was before. Your humiliation forced me back. She looked at him with clear, steady eyes. I cannot return with you, Azu. She raised her hand before he could speak. The flooding will stop, she said. The covenant can still hold through memory, through what you carry forward. She touched the bead in his palm and closed his fingers over it. Keep this. Teach your children what it means. Let this river be respected. Azu felt tears on his face. He did not try to stop them. I am sorry, he said. The simplest sentence he had ever spoken. Maji looked at him one last time. Her expression softened into something close to the warmth he had known during their time together. Not fully, not the same, but enough to tell him it had all been real. Then she turned toward the water. The river opened for her quietly, not violently, just making room. She walked in without hurrying. She did not look back. By the time the sun rose over Agita, the flooding had stopped. The water returned to its banks. The farms reappeared from beneath the surface. Kalechi's mother wept with relief at the river's edge. Azu returned to his workshop alone. He built things more carefully from that day. He repaired without boasting. He respected the water and taught others to do the same. He never married again. And he never forgot that some blessings wear human faces and leave the moment you try to own them. If fear and public pressure had not entered his home, do you think he would have kept her? Should forgiveness always restore what pride destroyed?